Reddit story: Love versus independence, when a relationship makes you lose yourself. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, but felt like you were losing yourself in the process? When love becomes suffocating, when your life and decisions aren't entirely your own, it can be a painful reality to face. This is the story of Sarah and Ryan. They loved each other, but as time went on, Sarah began to realize that she was losing her sense of self. She loved Ryan, but she couldn't continue sacrificing herself for him. And that's when everything started to fall apart. Sarah and Ryan had been together for 2 years. They met in college, and from the moment they started dating, everything seemed perfect. Ryan was charming, thoughtful, and seemed to understand Sarah in a way no one else had. At first, their relationship was full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. But over time, Ryan's controlling behavior began to surface. It started with small things. Ryan would always want to choose where they went out, what they did on weekends, and even what Sarah wore. He would criticize her choices, telling her that certain outfits didn't suit her, or that she should dress more professionally. Sarah tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a way for Ryan to show care. But the more he took control, the more she felt like she was losing her own sense of identity. Ryan started telling Sarah who she could be friends with, and even started making decisions for her career. He would suggest certain jobs, and would insist on her taking a job that he thought was best without consulting her feelings. Every time she tried to assert her independence, Ryan would shut her down, saying it was for her own good. Sarah was torn. She loved Ryan, but she started feeling like she couldn't make decisions without his approval. She would go along with his plans because she didn't want to upset him. But deep down, she began to feel more and more trapped. There were moments when Sarah would find herself alone, wondering who she had become. She stopped spending time with her friends because Ryan didn't like the people she hung out with. She stopped pursuing her passions because Ryan always had something else in mind. It wasn't that he didn't love her. It was that his love had become possessive, and she had lost her sense of self in the process. This is a story of love and loss, but not in the way most people think. It's about the loss of self in a relationship and how that can suffocate the very thing that once made you feel alive. Sarah loved Ryan with all her heart, but the more she gave up her own freedom, the less she recognized herself. Love should never make you feel like you have to lose who you are to keep the relationship intact. In any relationship, it's important to retain your own sense of identity and independence. While compromise is essential, it should never come at the expense of your well-being. Ryan's love for Sarah was genuine, but his control over her life was not. It's one thing to want to protect someone, but it's another thing entirely to try and change who they are. By controlling her decisions, Ryan didn't just hurt Sarah emotionally, he also diminished the very essence of their connection. Love should empower you to be the best version of yourself, not suppress your individuality. Over time, Sarah realized that she was no longer the person she once was. She had stopped living her life for herself and started living it for Ryan. Her friends had noticed the change, and even they started questioning why she had given up so much of herself. The love she once felt for Ryan was still there, but the relationship had become toxic. It wasn't that she didn't love him. It was that she needed to love herself first, and that meant stepping away from a relationship that made her lose her independence. This story strikes a chord with so many people because love is supposed to feel liberating, not limiting. When you lose yourself in a relationship, it's time to reevaluate whether it's truly serving you. Ye wanting me again commented, I've been in a relationship where I sacrificed so much of myself just to please my partner. I realized that I wasn't happy anymore, and I had to choose myself to be happy. 33K likes. True love should never demand that you lose yourself. It's about mutual respect, support, and independence. you love. And independence shared. You can love someone with all your heart, but you shouldn't have to change who you are to keep them. Independence is essential for any healthy relationship. 34. Independence doesn't mean you love the other person any less. It just means you value your own well-being and personal growth. Our self-respect first wrote, "When I realized that I was losing myself to keep the relationship going, I had to walk away. It was hard, but it was the right decision for me." 28.7K likes. Sometimes walking away is the healthiest decision you can make, even when it hurts. You have to choose yourself. Healthy boundaries said, "It's difficult when you love someone but you realize you're not free anymore." But self-respect and boundaries are key to keeping your happiness intact. 26.5K likes. Boundaries are essential. They allow us to love while still maintaining our independence and self-respect. Sarah's story reminds us that in any relationship, it's essential to maintain your sense of self. Love should never make you feel trapped or controlled. It should make you feel free to be yourself, to grow and to live the life you want. When you find out yourself losing, that it's time to reevaluate what's truly important. I loved you, but I wasn't happy anymore. And that's when I knew I had to let go. Have you ever loved someone so much, but no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't find happiness in the relationship anymore? You're still in love, but the joy, the spark, it's gone. And you find yourself asking if it's enough to stay or if it's time to let go. This is the story of Sophie and Jake. They loved each other. But as time went on, Sophie realized that her love for Jake wasn't enough to keep her happy. She had to make the hardest decision of all, to let go. Sophie and Jake had been together for 3 years. They met in college, and their chemistry was undeniable. At first, their relationship was full of love, adventure, and dreams for the future. They laughed together, traveled together, and spent hours discussing their hopes and aspirations. It felt perfect. But as time passed, Sophie began to notice a change. Jake, once so attentive and affectionate, started becoming distant. He became absorbed in his work, often canceling plans at the last minute, leaving Sophie to spend evenings alone. The small gestures of love that once filled their days, the sweet texts, the spontaneous dates, the thoughtful gifts, started to disappear. Sophie tried to talk to him about how she felt, but Jake was always too busy or too tired to listen, and when they did talk, it felt more like a routine than a conversation between two people who were in love. At first, Sophie convinced herself that it was just a phase. Maybe Jake was stressed about his job, or maybe they were just going through a rough patch. But the months went by and things didn't improve. She started feeling more and more alone, even when Jake was physically there. The silence between them became louder, and the laughter they once shared was replaced with awkwardness. Sophie loved Jake, but every day she felt like she was losing herself. She wasn't happy anymore, but she didn't know how to walk away from someone she still cared for deeply. This is a story about the painful reality many people face. Loving someone deeply, but realizing that love is no longer enough to make you happy. We often think that love will fix everything, that as long as we love someone, things will work out. But what happens when the love you give isn't met with the same energy, affection, or attention? What happens when you're still in love, but your emotional needs are no longer being met? Sophie's situation is something many can relate to. She didn't want to let go of Jake because she loved him, but she also knew that staying in a relationship where she wasn't happy would only lead to more pain. Love is supposed to add joy to our lives, not make us feel empty or unseen. Sophie realized that while she loved Jake, her happiness couldn't depend on him alone. She needed to find her own joy again, to feel like herself, not just the person she was in the relationship. It's easy to stay in a relationship out of habit, out of fear of being alone, or because we feel obligated to make it work. But sometimes the healthiest thing to do is to walk away. Not because you don't love the person, but because you need to love yourself first. Sophie loved Jake, but she also needed to find her own happiness outside of their relationship. All this story resonates with many people on Reddit, because many of us have been in relationships where we still loved the other person, but the relationship no longer brought us happiness. Choosing to walk away from someone you love is one of the hardest decisions, but sometimes it's the best choice for your mental and emotional well-being, of finding happiness. Again commented, "I love them, but I wasn't happy anymore. I stayed for so long hoping things would get better, but sometimes you just have to let go to find your own happiness." 31.9K likes. Love isn't enough if it's not met with the same care and respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to walk away and give both yourself and the other person the space to grow, you letting go. For me shared. I had to let go of someone I loved because I realized that I was losing myself in the process. It was hard, but it was the best decision for my happiness. 29.2K likes. Sometimes we need to choose ourselves, not because we don't care about the other person, but because we need to rediscover our own happiness, or walk away. For Self-Love wrote, "It wasn't about not loving them, it was about realizing that I couldn't be happy in a relationship that no longer brought me joy. Walking away was the hardest but best decision." 27.3K likes. Self-love is not selfish. It's about recognizing when a relationship is no longer serving your emotional needs and finding the courage to let go. Oka choose. Yourself said, "Love should bring you joy, not sorrow." When I realized I was just going through the motions, I knew it was time to move on and find my own happiness. 24.7K likes. Sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing your own happiness and well-being first. Sophie's story is a reminder that sometimes, even when love is still there, it's not enough to make a relationship work. We need to find happiness within ourselves first, and sometimes that means walking away from a relationship that no longer serves us. Choosing to love yourself is the first step to finding the happiness and fulfillment you deserve. I loved you, but I couldn't sacrifice my dreams for you. And that's when everything started to fall apart. Have you ever been at a crossroads in your life where you had to choose between love and your own dreams? Sometimes you realize that in a relationship you give so much of yourself, but in doing so, you lose sight of your own goals and aspirations. This is the story of Maya and Lucas. They loved each other, but as time passed, Maya began to question if her dreams were being sacrificed for the sake of love. And that's when everything started to fall apart. Maya and Lucas met at work, both ambitious and passionate about their careers. They quickly connected, spending late nights at the office, dreaming about their futures and their shared goals. For the first year, everything was perfect. They worked hard, but always made time for each other. They went on vacations, attended social events, and supported each other's career aspirations. But soon, Maya began to feel like she was being pulled in two directions. Lucas had big dreams of his own, and he was constantly asking Maya to put her goals on hold to support his. At first, it seemed harmless. She would take a break from her projects to help him with his, and he would do the same. But as time went on, Maya noticed that her own dreams, her passion for her career, the goals she had set for herself, were taking a back seat to Lucas's needs. He would ask her to skip work trips to be with him, to change her schedule to accommodate his plans, or to prioritize their relationship over her job. At first, Maya agreed, because she loved him, and it seemed like a small sacrifice for the sake of their relationship. But after a while, it started to feel like her life was no longer her own. Maya had spent years building her career, and she had big aspirations to move up the corporate ladder, to travel and make a name for herself in her field. But every time she made progress, Lucas seemed to pull her back, demanding more of her time and attention. Maya began to feel like she was losing herself in the relationship. She wasn't unhappy with Lucas. She loved him deeply, but she realized that she was neglecting her own dreams, and it hurt to see her goals slipping away. The highest breaking point came when Maya was offered an incredible opportunity, a promotion that would take her to another city. It was the chance of a lifetime, the culmination of all her hard work. But Lucas was upset. He didn't want her to leave, and he begged her to stay. He told her he couldn't see his future without her, but Maya knew that if she stayed, she would be giving up everything she had worked for. She loved him, but she realized she couldn't keep sacrificing her future for him. It was the hardest decision she'd ever had to make, but she knew she had to choose herself. This story is about the delicate balance between love and personal ambition. When you love someone, it's natural to want to support them and be there for them. But when that support starts to feel like a sacrifice of your own dreams, it can create a sense of confusion and resentment. Maya's decision to choose her career over her relationship with Lucas was not an easy one. She loved him, but she realized that in order to live her life to the fullest, she had to prioritize her own growth and happiness. We often hear about relationships where people make sacrifices for the one they love. But what happens when those sacrifices start to affect your own happiness and personal goals? Maya had spent years building her career, and she wasn't willing to give it all up. Love should not require you to lose yourself. True love should allow you to grow, to pursue your dreams, and to support each other in your personal journeys. Maya realized that she couldn't keep postponing her goals to keep someone else happy. At the end of the day, we have to remember that we are responsible for our own happiness. And sometimes that means making the tough choice to walk away from a relationship, even if it's not what we want. Choosing your career, your dreams, your identity doesn't mean you don't love the other person. It simply means you are honoring yourself. This story resonates with so many people on Reddit because it speaks to the struggle of choosing between love and your own personal growth. Sometimes we sacrifice so much for love, but at what cost? Personal growth. First commented, "I've been in a relationship where I had to choose my career over my partner's wishes. It was hard, but in the end, I knew I had to prioritize my own happiness and growth." Under 35. 1K likes. Choosing yourself and your future is often the hardest decision, but it's essential for your happiness. Career. Driven, love shared. Love shouldn't stop you from following your dreams. I chose my career, and while it was hard, I've never been happier. 32 to 6K likes. Love is about support, not about holding each other back. A healthy relationship allows both people to pursue their own passions. Success. And Love wrote, "I had to make the same decision. Love was important, but I couldn't lose my ambitions for someone else's vision." Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the best outcomes. 32K likes. Sometimes making the hardest decision can ultimately lead you to a better future both personally and in love. Usos Balance Matters said, "It's a struggle to balance love and ambition, but at the end of the day, you can't live for someone else's dreams. Your life is yours to live." 4K likes. True love is about understanding and supporting each other's dreams, not competing with them. Maya's story is a reminder that in relationships, it's essential to maintain your sense of self. You can love someone deeply and still choose to pursue your dreams. At the end of the day, the best thing you can do is stay true to yourself and make the decisions that will lead you to the happiness and fulfillment you deserve.